All right, so let's bring up our panelists, and if you will please show them more energy than you have shown us, we will appreciate that. From the Celsius Network, we have Alex Mashinsky.
Alex Mashinsky to the stage.
They get music.
Oh, we got music now. This is legit now. We are full on. Everybody.
Apparently,
they all decided to come all at once.
They're all Alex Mashinsky.
They all followed Alex's lead. Very good. Very
Alex. Okay, also with us,
They're amazing at following instructions, folks.
I know, this is great.
Very good.
Why are we here?
I don't know.
That's what they're all asking.
All right, take it away, guys. All right.
Raphael, Ouzan. Raphael is right there. Okay.
All right.
Naveed, I'm gonna say this right? I'm gonna say this right because I'm all about the names. Ihsanullah. Nailed it? Nailed it.
Very
yes. Anuj Gupta. There's Anuj right there. Give him a hand. And moderating this panel for us is the one and only David Wachsman. Gentlemen, start your engines. And look, there's enough microphones for everybody.
That was good. So many easy names to say, by the way. Mashinsky, Ouzan, Wachsman, Gupta. What was the other one? Yeah. Wow, it's tough. I'm glad you did that, Mr. Jocom. Anybody else need a mic? Yeah, right there you go, good sir. You need a mic? You can yell?
He doesn't need a mic. We're going to project. Take it away, folks.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was fantastic. So, yes, as described, this is a conversation about infrastructure. So, what is infrastructure? Because infrastructure can mean just about anything. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to talk about why we need to disrupt it or invert it, whatever that means. We're going to talk about the different ways with which we are changing the way infrastructure operates and why. But first, we're going to start with some introductions. So let's start here.
Hi, I don't know who I am, but yeah, my name is Anuj. I'm a researcher. I think about these stuff. That's it.
Thanks, Anuj.
Okay, I also wonder who I am, but specifically, as it pertains to this conference, I think my background is in cyber warfare and cryptography and fintech. The former I did in the intelligence in Israel, in the army, and then started a company in fintech called BuildGuard, which sold to an alternative lender called Prosper. A few years ago, then I worked at a fund called Thrive Capital, where I learned a lot about investing, which I realized I could apply to this space to understand it better and correct my views as quickly as possible, and therefore founded a fund called BlockNation, which does early stage investing and incubation of companies in the space.
And we'll talk about your investment thesis in a little bit. Alex.
So Alex Mashinsky, I'm the founder of Celsius Network. Before Celsius, I did 7 startups, including one called Arbinet, which was the first company to build voice over IP. I'm sure all of you used it today, right? Anyone here used VoIP? So learning the lessons of kind of building infrastructure for moving phone service from TDM to IP. And right now, so from VoIP to MoIP, from voice over IP to money over IP. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, I guess.
Hi, I'm Naveed Ihsanullah. I'm head of engineering at Algorand. Well, actually, let me pause there.
Did I hear a holler for Algorand there?
Yes.
Oh, I did.
I will hopefully be joining Anuj in the thinking department here. I'm transitioning to research after the View 1 launch, so I'm pretty excited by that. Prior to Algorand, I was working at Mozilla, running a bunch of teams over there, including inventing WebAssembly. That happened on my team. And I've been in the system development, system security space for decades.
And we certainly should talk about WebAssembly up here too. I think that's actually part of the infrastructure that we're seeing is increasingly relied upon. For instance, CVC Casper, they're looking at that quite a lot right now. So let's talk about infrastructure today. I think it's very important before disrupting something to understand what it is that we have at present. So what is an existing analog, if any, for a layer 1 blockchain protocol, Naveed? Is there anything? What exactly are you disrupting?
What are the existing layer 1 applications?
Yes. So are you just disrupting layer, let's call it version 1 blockchains like Bitcoin?
I think that's definitely something that we're looking at. The existing blockchain protocols like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and their derivatives, really exciting and interesting ideas. but the applications that have been applied to them do not work because of the sort of inherent properties they possess. So that's an area for disruption. And I think once we look at something as a decentral system, we realize there's a lot of other elements that may need to be in there. Once you bring in finance, for example, that level requires entirely different constructs for price stability, or at least relative stability, so you can build a business model there. These are all things that I think are ripe for disruption.
So, I mean, I think you bring up a fair question that we should discuss. Anuj, your organization builds essentially cyber insurance products, right? Is the infrastructure today sufficient for those to operate well? What would you need to go and build a cyber insurance product that's effective and global in nature, or one that a million companies could utilize on a daily basis? Is the infrastructure, does it exist today, or what do you need?
So at Tabookey, the realization was that with all the cyber assets, so for example, digital assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, when you're trading these assets, moving these assets, it's really scary if you cannot predict the risk around that. So mistakes happen all the time. It could happen, you didn't want to have a transaction and it happened because your wallet got stolen. Or if that gets stolen, how do you get your access back? So to have something high stakes, you need to have a provision for some sort of insurance. So that's why right now, the infrastructure, like the blockchain-wise, of course, it's not totally ready. That's what, I mean, there's others also building similar applications on insurance. But unless that is built, you would not see a mass adoption. So for example, I mean, if you look at the history of capitalism, I mean, the birth of insurance really coincided with the ships going for, you know, voyages and everything. So without that kind of a risk protection, you cannot take chances like that. And that you need for businesses to thrive, be it on blockchain or even on like regular. So of course, in blockchain, you need that to really make it to the point that you could see blockchains beyond the speculative element, trading element of actually using blockchain for doing like everyday stuff like dApps and things like that.
So I want to bring it to you, Raphael, because I think that we've seen two different takes so far on what the fundamental infrastructure is. Not that either are wrong, but we've heard is that we need to have specific technical elements met for popular, let's call it dApps, or application to be built off blockchain, vis-a-vis, well, essentially, disruptive applications. And we've also heard that there's not going to be a real proliferation of these applications without insurance products, because nobody's going to take stupid risks. Least of all, businesses that know how to build consumer products, deploy them, and support them. But what would an investor who's been investing in this space and deep diving think? Where do you see, let's call this the common ground? Where do we need to work from? Where does the infrastructure need to start being disruptive?
I'm actually an investor in Tabookey as well. And I think this is a really interesting application of, you know, if you use WeChat in China, you probably know that you can insure, like with a text message, you could get insured for the weather being bad tomorrow. And if you're shooting a movie or holding a conference, people are going to be late, like you can pay back for that in an instant. Obviously, we don't have that anywhere close in the US, the rest of the world, because we have a completely different model. When we talk about building a new internet, so to speak, which is really shifting the trust models that we know, that creates a whole new world of challenges that we have to solve, and without solving them, we won't get anywhere. And I think Tabookey plays there really well because it's a blockchain, it's a use of blockchain that actually applies to all kinds of different real-world applications. With BlockNation and kind of that investing thesis, or the reason why I'm so excited about what can be done is, well, because it's just really cool. But more importantly, because I think that looking at technology today, we have significant gaps. We have gaps in digital security, and we know it, and I think people are tired of it. Or like, think about the past few weeks. How many hacks that your data was involved in, probably, have you heard about? Like Facebook got hacked repeatedly, every credit bureau in the US, government and so forth. We joke that there are two types of companies that were that were hacked and companies that didn't know that they were hacked. So we see that there is a
That
system
sounds
failure
like
almost.
a bad joke.
Yeah, it's a terrible joke. It's awful. And when you see that even the companies with the best engineers in the world cannot actually defend themselves from people stealing our data, then there is a problem.
So would you call this corrupt infrastructure, improper infrastructure, or is this? Are you asking to fight a battle that can't be won if there's no way to ever prevent hacks entirely?
I think it's a technology that is incapable of solving the problem, and the reliance on problems that, like, okay, what's the biggest lie on the internet? You know, try to think of the biggest lie on the internet that we personally, all of us, have made this lie multiple times in the past few months, few years for sure.
Trust?
Yeah, that little checkbox that says I have read and accepted these terms of service, right? I mean, have you ever read these terms of service? Here, there's like one lawyer here on the first row. She's like, yeah, I read them all. But we never do that, right? And somehow we're like, okay with that. Like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's how I sign up to literally all the services where I provided all my data since, forever, since I have a computer or phone. That's insane.
Well, one of the great problems that we have is, how as an entrepreneur are you supposed to actually build applications knowing that it's incredibly risky in one way, shape, or form, knowing that we may not even have the basic infrastructure to go and build this? So Alex, for instance, pioneered a technology that, I mean, you must have actually been super concerned was too early for the time with VoIP. I mean, who knew that it was going to become so popular so quickly? Even in your wildest dreams, you couldn't have expected it to take off the way it has. That having been said, now you're already building essentially, let me put it this way, revitalizing banking infrastructure on a, let's call it shaky infrastructure today, inherent with tons of risks, where there's this shadow of, well, let's call it additional potential malfeasant actors. First, why did you decide to do this? And do you think you're making this gamble at the right time?
Well, for a change, I'm late to the game. Usually I'm early to the game. VoIP, when I built the first gateway, the speed of the fastest dial-up modem was slower than the bandwidth needed to make one VoIP connection. So basically, no one in the world had a fast enough connection to enable VoIP, right? So it was impossible to make even a single VoIP call. But you knew that the internet is going to scale and mature to get to the point where everybody is going to have an always-on connection and be able to basically transact in real time the way we do today. So let me make a few statements that I think will be controversial in this room. The blockchain that we have, the way we have it today, is like the internet circa 1986. 6 universities connected with a 45 megabit circuit, and no one can do anything on that infrastructure. The blockchain today, or Bitcoin for example, is the world's slowest database. It's the most slow implementation of any database ever created by any commercial implementation. There's nothing slower than the Bitcoin database.
A lot of mean words for Bitcoin.
No, but my point is that so that's one, right? Let's just look at what we have, right? The blockchain that we know, the public blockchain, Bitcoin or Ethereum, is not connected to the internet in any way. Okay, most of you think that the blockchain somehow runs on the internet. Those are two separate worlds, not connected in any way. So when we talk about building infrastructure, we're building a completely new system from scratch. It's like an alien that runs on a completely different operating system, has a separate DNA that is going to grow in its own way, nothing to do with the internet. Okay, so when you're trying to transition those two worlds, when you're trying to bring banking into the blockchain, which again is the slowest thing out there, there's a lot of challenges in that crossing over, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that most of the institutions are not crossing over. They're not comfortable operating on the other side, right? And the ones that do cannot scale. So we caught in that crossing the chasm where we don't have enough adoption, right? Yesterday we had a speaker event in the stadium, and the stadium was empty. It was only 100 of us talking to each other, and that's what the blockchain is. The stadium is empty. right? Anyone was there yesterday? Not, I guess not in the, so we got to fill up the stadium, okay? That's the analogy here. And unfortunately, Bitcoin is 10 years old. When the internet was 10 years old, we had 600 million users. The blockchain has maybe 16 million active users. That's, for me, that's a failure. So what I'm trying to do is find the one or two things that the current infrastructure can do that can attract 100 million users. Not wait to build the next infrastructure or hope that it's going to get faster, cheaper, better. What's the one or two things that the blockchain can do today that will actually attract 100 million users? Because these 2,000 ICOs that we had, experimenting, solving cancer and healthcare and solving our advertising problems and all kind of other stuff, I just don't think any of that's going to happen.
Okay, so Alex, why is it so important? Oh,
Sorry,
sure.
because I think something that we have not touched, which is, I think, incredible about blockchain, which is absolutely unique, it is not just a technology, because blockchain is also a socio-legal framework, which is completely like a regular technology, is agnostic to social-legal things. And that's why governance is, you don't hear about governance, say about Facebook. People talk about regulation,
Well,
not governance.
recently.
It's regulation, not governance, because it's not participatory. So when it's participatory, then you talk about governance. Then you talk about the legal implications of this. Then you talk about the social implications of a system where, like, you can build something like digital co-ops, like a DAO, for example. It is unheard of. You don't have it still because the technology, the technical part is not ready. But I think it is also taking time because, if I might say, and I'm not sure, but I think we're trying to do it right this time. So by that, what I mean is we're trying to look at the social legal angle. We're trying to look at the far-fetched, even the philosophical angle of it, to be it more inclusive, to be it more democratic. Now, is it democratic? No, of course not.
Okay, so these, I want to make sure I boil down your two statements into something very important. Alex said that we need to fill the stadium. That is to say that right now we're in one small section of it talking to each other, but to fill the stadium we need to do something, and right now the only way we can fill the stadium, i.e. bring people to blockchain, is by using one of the few applications that today are viable, and that would be essentially lending. I think, Alex, is that what you're trying to say?
Well, so interest income, right? None of us are earning any interest. Our banks are making a lot of money, but we're not making any money, right? And that's one application that the blockchain can do better than the banks.
So that's important. And then,
right?
Yes.
We forget that interest income is something that we deserve to have. We, meaning the 7.5 billion people that live on this planet, that don't earn any money on our money. That is a killer app by itself, nothing else. If we stop doing everything else, if we just solve that problem, 7.5 billion people want interest income on their money. That is a killer app.
Killer app for technology. And so the
killer
question
app for the blockchain.
Right. And
so about technology, because
for this technology, the blockchain.
If the blockchain does not find a killer app, all of us are going to be looking for something else to do. Okay?
That doesn't seem like a very good reason for the world to pivot, because we might need something else to do.
Voice of IP is the largest distributed application on the internet. There's nothing else. Like, you look at social media or advertising or anything else, it's concentrated. Right? Facebook owns 60% of the internet. One company, centralized company, 60% of the internet. You show me every service all on the internet, you will see a centralized mega company owning it. Right? So the internet promised us the opposite of that. The internet, when I got into the internet, 91, 92, promised us, every one of us, have access to everything. Full transparency. We didn't get that.
So what you're trying to say is that this decentralization is why blockchain matters.
A killer app matters. You don't deliver a killer app that is distributed peer-to-peer and does something for 1 billion people or more, we are dead. We as a community are dead, because the next technology is going to come and take our place.
So Raphael, is this what we need? Do we need this decentralized technology? What are the, again, fundamental reasons why? And essentially, we're talking about an infrastructure inversion here. If 60% of the internet, as Alex says, is essentially controlled by one company or by a very few, is this new internet going to, well, be any different?
You know, I wonder if we're really looking for a killer app. I think the challenging thing with blockchain is that it comes at a time where companies worldwide and consumers are looking for radical solutions with things that don't work. You're right that it is the world's slowest database. It's expensive to use, it's complicated, and yet I am constantly surprised that most of the Fortune 500 financial institutions have had teams since 2012, 2013, working on figuring out, playing with Ethereum and the likes, way before I believe most of the people at this conference even heard of it. Like, that's absolutely crazy. And I'm really buggled about this, because you wouldn't see like those Goldman Sachs looking at the new database distribution of Oracle, right? They don't care. Like, let's wait for this to be mature. And I think that's because we live in a very strange time where we had this hyper growth of connectivity, but we're not able to complete the last mile. And the last mile is kind of stuck. And it's stuck because we cannot hold data safe. Our data is not safe. And it's both a policy, social issue, and a technology issue. And from a financial services standpoint, where I very much connect with you on like new financial products, there couldn't be a more exclusive club than financial services today. Not only is it an exclusive club that is limited to very few people that are already somewhat wealthy or in wealthy countries, for entrepreneurs like us, for people to get up in the room and say, I will do a new financial product that can grow to 7 billion people, you're not going to do it. Because the infrastructure that right now is available to you is an absolute pain. And there's like every roadblock possible that has been designed into the law, into the tech stacks, into everything to ensure you won't be able to do it. Now, what's happening here is very interesting. It's basically not necessarily, hey, one killer app that if you can do this and this, it'll be awesome, and millions of people will storm in. It's not ready for millions of people to use the blockchain.
So what does it need to be ready?
Well, it needs a bunch of things, but just the point that I'm making is that there is a new stack that is being built, and it's slowly and painful, but it is being built. And when you're going to see Facebook, for example, use a tiny piece of that, they're not just going to do the application, they're going to be releasing, I'm sure, a new chunk of that stack that is being built. So we're in that moment of like, we're warming up the engine, building the alien, but enabling a completely new stack so that will be where people will be working, because today it doesn't work.
Yeah, before you
just one line. So paying interest once a month, the entire planet can run on Ethereum, and you can pay everybody interest once a month, because it does not require 1 billion transactions a second. So the question is, what is the application? Some applications, like advertising, require 1 billion transactions a second. Some applications require nothing from a speed standpoint. So I would disagree that the killer app has to have speed with it. The killer app is something we're solving for the majority of the population, right? Just like we did VoIP. The phone companies used to charge $3 a minute, now it's free. That is a very simple thing, right? The question here, the banks used to pay us interest, now they don't. Let's find a different way for everybody to earn interest, right? That's a simple transition that does not require speed.
Naveed?
So I don't disagree the idea of getting interest. If you were going to give me interest, or anyone, I'd be happy to take it. However, like the point you made about the blockchain being the world's slowest database, maybe, but that's somewhat akin to saying a piece of paper is the world's weakest steel girder. It might be able to be used in a structural element, but you're missing what it really brings to the table. And I think in the blockchain case, it's that ability to have trust where people have never met. That ability to disconnect will allow the Goldman Sachs of the world to connect with other banks without a government intermediary to bypass all that friction.
Look, I'm spending 100%, 150% of my time on the blockchain.
Yeah.
In no way am I saying the blockchain is negative or bad or whatever.
Right. My point, though, is going back to that whole killer app idea, maybe we haven't discovered it, maybe it is interest, but I think we want to look at the fundamental property of the blockchain. What new thing does it bring?
You can wait until it's fast enough, and nothing will happen. You will die
He's
off.
not waiting, he's
I'm
building
not waiting
it.
at all.
No,
First
I'm
of all,
not saying you, I'm
correct.
saying all of us.
Well, my point is, yes, we're making it faster, but we recognize that financial service companies really want to use it right now. And let's give them something that they can lower their barrier to entry. So, Algorand is, I think the first and maybe the only blockchain project that is a member of ISDA. So we can bring swaps and derivatives directly to blockchain in a way that the financial institutions know how to use. So that's a way.
That's a private blockchain. That's not a
No, it's
public
not private.
blockchain.
It's completely public. Everything we do is open source and.
I know, but 7 billion people don't trade derivatives, right?
So they can.
The issue is they don't.
They
They
will
don't
be able
need.
to on Algorand.
People are struggling to finish the month. Forget about derivatives, right? Look, I just came from Lendit, right, in San Francisco, and you know I was on the panel there, and my argument to the fintech community is that after 30 years we've done nothing to disrupt the banks. Nothing. 30 years of fighting with the banks, all of San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. What did we deliver? Nothing. So the opportunity with the blockchain, with the public blockchain, is to disrupt the banking, the infrastructure. It's not going and helping the banks, right? When I see people going and saying, okay, I'm going to help the banks, thank you. I'll take a few more of those. Yeah. So you want to fight, you want to create a new future for us and our children, you got to disrupt the system. Right?
So again, Alex, I'm going back
JP Morgan
to hold on.
Ethereum and creating a
Before
private
Alex.
blockchain.
So you're now saying that not just the killer app, but the use of blockchain is primarily to disrupt banks.
The public blockchain, the killer app, you can do one or two things with it. That's it. It's not good for 1,000 things. Again, by default, it's the slowest, most distributed, right, consensus-based infrastructure we have. We got to find the one thing that it can do, that it can scale with. If it doesn't scale, every bank in the world is trying to kill it. If you think banks are trying to help us, you don't understand what's happening out there, right? I mean, again, JP Morgan created a copy of Ethereum, called it Quorum, and gave it to all their rich friends to make sure that their rich friends don't go and use our infrastructure.
That's not exactly what happened with JP Morgan, and I would know because I hired the VP of strategy from JP Morgan to run strategy for me.
Yes, so what you have an argument that they're doing something else?
So no, yes, he's into crypto, and that was the first open source project that Jamie Dimon ever approved.
It's not if it's closed community, if it's a private blockchain, it cannot be open source, right? By definition.
Those are two different things.
JP Morgan runs the network. They decide what transfer is transferred, what can be reversed, and so on and so on. It's not a distributed open architecture that is ran by independent nodes and so on.
So it is a permissioned blockchain. That is true.
Permission doesn't mean anything.
But open source is something very different. So let's talk a little bit of Algorand.
Okay.
Can we do that?
I would love to.
Okay. So what type of infrastructure are you building? What are the improvements exactly? And what's it going to mean for people trying to build insurance companies, building fintech companies, or building new banking solutions?
So the way we see it at Algorand is the blockchain, for all the reasons Alex believes and for all the reasons all of you believe, it's a fantastic technology, fantastic idea, but it suffers from some limitations to get to those aspirations. It isn't scalable enough. It's definitely not decentral enough. And the security on the blockchain is okay in some ways, but there's still a lot that can be done there, especially against network level attacks. And so at Algorand, we have an amazing team, but our founder, Sylvia Macaulay, imagined a new consensus mechanism that is instant and final and works at world scale. So 7.7 billion people can agree on something in every 1 to 4 seconds, depending on how you do the math and how happy the internet is with you when it comes to block propagation. And with that, basically all those ideas you have right now can be turbocharged.
So, like, for instance, what ideas are you talking about? So I know that Apple built the App Store so entrepreneurs could come up with apps that Apple could never dream of. Right. And that did sell the iPhone, let's be honest. But they had some ideas of applications that could be built.
Sure.
What ideas are you and the team thinking about right now that either you don't have time to deploy and create, or, well, you'd like someone else to?
So we definitely are looking at partners and working with people who already have done work with transactions. We think when you have a blockchain that's fast enough that can do Visa scale transactions, then you can replace Visa, that you have infrastructure that can finally do that.
So it does go back to banking, and Alex is right.
I think finance is one of the places ripe for disruption by blockchain. You don't need an intermediary you trust. The trust is diffused by all of us with our nodes on the blockchain. So that's one very clear example. I think the swaps and derivatives and other financial constructs like bonds and lending, making those massively available to everyone with any kind of node, whether it's a cell phone, a Raspberry Pi, or a server in a data center, that is the beginning of democratization of finance. I think we have a lot to do there. You still need internet penetration everywhere. but you have to pick the battles you can fight.
So, I mean, Raphael, you sold the company to Lending Club, was it, or Prosper?
Prosper.
Prosper. So how is fintech going to go and change if it's built on or working with blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, what the blockchain does with Bitcoin, with the protection from double spend in a decentralized fashion, is basically to be able to digitize. Like, to me, I read this and I say, oh, there's a way to digitize value in a way that value can be fully natively digital, which is something that couldn't happen before, right? Because information could just be copied, but with value, if you duplicate this value, it loses value by itself. So of course it has huge implication with finance, with anything that has to do with value, basically. And this fintech step that we have, you're right, has been hindering so much of what entrepreneurs have been thinking about. Like, there's the industry of financial services couldn't be less, like, it's like inclusion. It creates friction on a daily basis. I mean, anyone who's filed taxes, like, just it's like
April 15 was yesterday in the United States.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like still reeling, like still recovering from all this paperwork. Like, it's all a mess, and we know it, we feel it. No one ignores it, but it seems that in a very interesting way, like, I think we'll look back at this time as a little bit of a pause, where there was like an incremental innovation in almost every industry following a disruption, and suddenly blockchain happened. People had to work for a while to kind of figure out how to build up the right kind of set of tools and upgrades and features that were necessary to strike the right point of partners, scalability, cost efficiency, and then things will take off in a way that we couldn't imagine. So it's similar. So when we look for where the value is and kind of infrastructure versus application, I think we're in this very interesting flow where, it was like in the 90s where things started to be online, and that was interesting, but that was not like incredible. What was incredible was the companies that, like the Google and the Facebook of the world, which said, oh, people are now online. We can do new business models and use cases that we couldn't even dream of before.
So is one of those...
That's the time where we are.
Alex?
I'm going to spend 30 minutes in the other conference room right after this, presenting exactly, I have like 10 slides about that. Like, why are we stuck? What is going to take? I mean, the problem we're having is that the large institutions are winning in every round of innovation that we're trying to hit. Every time we hit them with innovation, we, the innovators, lost, in the financial sector I'm talking about. And the large institutions, the guys that control the finance, control the laws, have basically won. And that's why we're earning less and less interest every year, right? And we're paying more. I mean, the banks take your money for free and lend it to your neighbor, your money, not their money, to your neighbor at 25%. They keep 25%, they pay you nothing. And none of us stops depositing money with banks, right? So why is that? How can they get away with it? It's not about your banking fees. It's about how much money they're making on your money. JP Morgan made $30 billion in profit. They can give each person on the planet $5 every year and still have money left over. That's how profitable this one company is.
Well, it seems like we need infrastructure
you want to disrupt
inversion.
that? You're not going to disrupt that with incremental improvements. So the blockchain is a perfect infrastructure to do it, but the application has to be ripe to do something you can do today. Not 3 years from now, not 5 years from now. They'll kill you before you get there.
Well, everyone, thank you very much for this panel. This has been fascinating. I wish we could have done it for 30 minutes longer.
Thank you.